Welcome to Leading Out Loud with Dr. Chantel Manahan, the podcast where we amplify authentic voices, bold ideas, and real impact in education. I'm a K-12 CTO, education consultant, and proud forever learner. And I believe leadership gets better when we share what works, what's hard, and what's possible. So let's dive into stories and strategies from the leaders shaping the future of schools, one conversation at a time. Hi, today we have the pleasure of talking with my friend Stacy Cunningham. Stacy is a former K-12 school district state reporter. She currently works for Marsha Brenner Associates, supporting schools with their Power School instances and state reporting. And she's also the executive director of the Indiana Education Data Alliance. So Stacy, welcome to Leading Out Loud.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to take us back to the beginning. What first drew you into the world of education data?
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Chantal. I really, I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to talk about things today. So I actually started working in the private sector, working in IT support, lots of SQL databases, some HTML, JavaScript coding. And basically I was the person that you called when their screen went blank or their data disappeared. I've always loved problem solving, making systems do what they should have been doing in the first place, you know. So eventually I moved into a data management position at the Northeast Indiana Special Education Cooperative, and then later moved into the data practitioner role at DeKalb Central Schools. And then that's when I really realized, like, this is a different kind of challenge, right? Because you are at the district level is a very unique set of challenges, because it's not just about fixing data. It's about fixing the processes or to create the data, right? And sometimes that means like, okay, gently explaining for the 10th time, the 15th time, like why student IDs are not the place to get creative, right? Why the entry date matters. It's very unique at the district level.
It is very unique. You are definitely right about that. Was there a specific moment when you realized that this was your passion, that it was more than just a job, that it was a mission?
Yes, and I can very distinctly remember when that happened. So state reporting I've always loved data. And when Indiana, the legacy, we took the spreadsheets and we manipulated them. And in the fall of 2021, I was part of an email thread with about a dozen data administrators from nearby districts that I had worked previously with from the Northeast, from the Special Ed Cooperative. And we've been replying back and forth for weeks, you know, dealing with the same issues with the EdFi implementation from the state agencies, talking about state reporting issues and trying to troubleshoot things together, because if you've ever gone through an EdFi implementation at the district level, it is extremely challenging. And then I decided, let's get risky, because I hit the reply all button and asked, would anybody like to come together and let's meet in person to talk about this stuff? And literally within minutes, I got flooded with responses of, yes, oh my gosh, yes, please, when can we meet? Can we meet today? How many people can I bring? And then with that one reply all, it turned into, we were meeting monthly. And then we added virtual options. So we were doing it twice a month. That we started with 13 school districts and it grew to 27 very quickly. And there have even grown to like spin-off groups. Mm-hmm. So it was in that moment that I realized that it stopped being like this job of trying to fix problems, that there was a movement that needed to happen, right? There was a gap that needed to be filled. Because I saw that when data people who were often very siloed felt very isolated, but there was a lot of power that happened when we got in the same room and they realized that they're not alone, that they're not crazy, that the fetal position was considered a viable option for a coping mechanism, maybe not always the best choice. You know, that yes, everybody's uploads are failing too, but that, you know, even though you felt like that it was okay. Like just that feeling of not being alone. And so it was that building of community that makes that work sustainable and makes it feel like, okay, we can do this. And that really just kind of skyrocketed everything.
I am not a data practitioner anymore. When I first took over this role, that was one piece of my job, doing part of the state reporting, and it was really spread out. And it was nobody's job, but it was everybody's job to complete state reporting at that time. And really, the EdFi implementation changed all of that, really put the onus on one person. And one person to deal with all those people who touch the data. No longer was it, this report is your job and that report is my job. So I'd heard a lot about you from my state reporting people, but actually you and I had never met, even though our districts are very close together. But you and I met at the EdFi Tech Congress. It was just not this past year in 2025, but in 2024.
I know.
And we met and we immediately, like, the synergy was there. And 6 weeks later, you and I and a small group of women essentially launched a statewide data alliance, a professional organization for data practitioners and state reporters. And we held a full-blown conference for a full day. We fed everyone and we had enough sponsors to make that happen. Thinking about it now, I'm still thinking we were insane, but we really made it work. What made you agree that day when we met to say, yes, we're doing it?
When I think about it, it is honestly like one of those like lightning bolt moments in your life that it was just kismet. At Tech Congress, we were sitting in those sessions, where we have state agencies and ed tech vendors, and they're doing their full-on Vanna White routines of like showing their dashboards and products built from all, the ed tech, EdFi data that they're getting from the districts, and meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking, does anyone want to talk about the data that's actually like how it's getting there? That was, because I knew districts where if you said the word EdFi, they look at you like you just made up a word. And it was like everyone was admiring the frosting and totally ignoring the messy kitchen where the cake was baked. I always said it was kind of like I use the metaphor of it's like building an ice sculpture that looks really fancy out of muddy water. And I thought there's a problem here, right? And it was at that moment that we were all looking at each other, talking, that there was an actual gap, like a disconnect. And someone needs to speak up for these people doing the actual data work in the districts. And if no one else is going to, well, maybe we could do this. And so it was all of us standing at this table. And I thought we need to bring all these people together. And within, I think, 4 or 5 minutes, we all had a plan, and it was incredible. Now, this was not a solo effort. We had an incredible team of committed data admins, you and a couple of other district administrators who really stepped up, gave of their evenings and weekends, a little bit of sanity, let's clarify. And also I want to say in the peak of reporting season here in Indiana,
Amen.
So I don't want to, yes, because they care deeply about the work, right? Like that's the thing, that's what is so key here. And I just want to, you were such a huge part of that because, you were, okay, here's how we're doing it, and gave of your experience working with conferences and being on boards. And it was such a great opportunity. It just was like everything just seamlessly fit together. And the reason why I said yes is because it wasn't about hosting a conference. It wasn't about feeding people. It was about building this space that did not exist, but needed to. A space where data administrator voices were at the center and not an afterthought. They were a space where data administrators, district leaders, SISs, vendors, IDOE, all of these important stakeholders were having conversations, whether together or by themselves, but needed to come together, right? And when you get the right people in the room with a shared mission, 6 weeks is plenty of time.
Think you really hit the nail on the head. It wasn't ever about the conference. It was about the community. And you'd seen that on a smaller scale with what you had created here in Northeast Indiana, those, 12 districts growing to 27. It's that community. And, you've already alluded to this, that data work it's so essential to school districts. It's often invisible. It's often siloed. What do you wish more school and district leaders understood about the role of the data practitioners, especially state reporters?
Oh gosh, how much time do we have? Like for me, this honestly is probably the biggest barrier to a high quality education, is the lack of understanding at the leadership level about the work that it actually takes. Data is quite literally the backbone of the org of every district. But yet the role of the data practitioner, especially the state reporter, is often invisible. And until something happens and everybody's in panic mode, right? Before EdFi, state reporting was like a technical task with like you export a spreadsheet and you format it and you upload it, and it requires like a basic to intermediate admin skill level, right? Not much influence on anything. But EdFi really changed the game, because then you have, your data, every data point that's submitted to the state pulls directly from your student information system. And then your student information system is, you're talking data interoperability, right? In a whole data ecosystem. That means your SIS has to be perfectly aligned with state reporting requirements, that have to align with board policies, handbooks, and then how staff are actually using it every day. Like take attendance, for example, right? If your board approved attendance policies say one thing, but then your SIS attendance codes are another, right there, like they're misaligned and you don't even realize it. Like how often do you review those things? The problem with data administrators is the fact that they are rarely in leadership positions. So they have zero authority to change policy, right? And yet they're expected to make the data that has already been entered, using policy that may or may not align with state reporting requirements work. Data that now reflects policy decisions, are above their pay grade. State reporting ideally should drive district level conversations. Not be reactive after the budget takes a hit and gets flagged for noncompliance, right? Until leaders truly understand that whole component, that they need to be a strategic partner, you're really putting your most critical decisions on a shaky data foundation. You honestly are.
You mentioned, the funding, like when your funding is audited or is revoked based on poor data that's being sent, districts really rely on, of course, that funding, but the accuracy of that data. It controls funding, it controls staffing. How do you think we, meaning people in school districts and people in the Indiana Education Data Alliance, how can we help data professionals advocate for the importance of their role and speak confidently to their supervisors when they don't necessarily have that authority by title?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first we need to stop treating data work like it's like a digital janitorial service, right? It's just data cleanup. And I feel like we can start recognizing it as strategic infrastructure. Like it is core, right? Data administrators aren't just inputting numbers and exporting it like, pre-EdFi days. They're safeguarding information that drives hundreds of millions of dollars in funding, staffing decisions, and student outcomes, right? And I think to advocate effectively, they need language that connects that work to what leadership cares about. Money, compliance, credibility, like what is the proper language to use. And the more we empower them to translate those technical language accuracy into very real world consequences, like you said, missed funding or missed compliance, the more I think they'll start to be seen as essential. And we need to normalize the idea that when a data person says, actually, it's not really a tech problem, it's decision making. Like, this is when they start to speak up, they need to listen. That confidence comes from training, the community, I think, the community building of like, we're all in this together. But most of all, I feel like it's giving them a seat at the table where the decisions are made.
And that's really what we all want, right? As humans, like a place to be seen, for our work to
Mm-hmm.
be valued. And when we held the conference last summer, the Indiana Education and Data Alliance conference, we saw that spark starting to happen, that, oh, I am seen for who I am. And that whole day was just packed with energy.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back on that first conference experience, what inspired you and or what surprised you most about that day?
Oh, as you were talking about that day, I literally just got chills because it was such an inspirational day for so many reasons. But the thing that inspired me most that day were the data administrators who, and I was at the registration table watching them come in, and you could see just the defeat on their face, the frustration on their face. But as the day progressed and you could see them, that frustration kind of start to lift, the understanding, the clarity in their eyes, that it was just like the weight had been lifted off of them. And so many of them would stop me in the hallways. It was almost like they were just this relief all over them. And they would just look at me with such gratitude of, thank you, because I finally get it now. Because we were giving them all of the information, right? Connecting the dots of the SIS side of things and the state EdFi things. And they were finally able to have all of the pieces of the puzzle to feel successful in their job and not feel like a hamster in a wheel. And that to me was probably it still gives me chills. Because these are brilliant, hardworking people, and who have been trying to do an impossible job without the full picture. And for the first time, they felt like, someone had handed them all the pieces and introduced them to a whole room of people who were right there with them, that they were not alone. Like you said, that they were seen and they were heard. And it wasn't just informative, right? We're not just handing you, here's some theoretical information. We literally were giving them tools, empowering them with tools to be successful. And they didn't feel alone anymore. And that literally was such a game changer day.
Stacy, another great opportunity that you've had this year is to participate in the Emerging Leaders cohort from our friends at Project Unicorn. And for those of you listening, if you don't know about Project Unicorn, it's this awesome nonprofit dedicated to data interoperability, especially in K-12. And part of your capstone project, Stacy, was developing a mentorship program for all of the data practitioners here in Indiana. So my question is, why mentorship, and what did the process teach you about what this community needs?
Well, like I said before, I'm like a firm believer in collaboration. As you can tell, I really like bringing people together. But with that comes a responsibility of like passing on knowledge. So there's a quote that I love that says, a mentor is not someone who walks ahead of you to show you how they did it, right? A mentor walks alongside of you to show you what you can do. And I've talked with hundreds of data admins throughout the country, and there is an underlying theme with every single one. They feel insignificant in their district, and yet very clearly understand the heavy weight of the responsibility they carry in their role as the data administrator. And so I really wanted to create a mentorship program that taught them that we have to meet people where they're at in their career, whether it's early, mid, late, skill level, and goals. That communication skills are a huge part of the conversation, right? We were just alluding to that with discussing, with the district leadership, but also between a mentor and a mentee, but building that empowerment to have those difficult conversations in order to make change. It's really important, I think, to make change. We also have to foster that passing on of the knowledge, I think is super important.
I know mentors have helped me so much in my career, and I'm sure yours as well. So being able to offer that opportunity for others it's a blessing. So we've talked about how the role of the data practitioner in a school district has traditionally been siloed, it's been overlooked. And we had the one-day conference last summer to help bring people together. How do we continue to build a sense of belonging and identity in this professional space, despite the challenges that they face?
Well, I think that it starts with relationship building.
Mhm.
And I always tell people, start with coffee, right?
Mhm.
Find somebody who has the same role as you in a neighboring district and say, hey, I am struggling in what I'm working on. Would you like to meet for coffee? It's a simple question. Um, and then don't even talk about work, talk about life and start building that relationship. And because the small act can go a long way. And I think you just need to create that space because I think oftentimes these people feel invisible or misunderstood. This work is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You don't create belonging overnight either. It's a process. It takes time. It takes trust. Showing up consistently, even when it feels like no one hears you or no one sees you. But consistency is also key. People need to see that you're not just there when you have a crisis or a deadline, that you're invested in the long haul. Because I think this role specifically has traditionally worked in silos. State reporting has traditionally worked in silos because the data are managed in different departments throughout the school district. And EdFi really was the game changer for that. And you need to create, identity and belonging start to grow, but people feel seen and heard and connected. But I think that's when the network starts, right? And giving people that space to talk about things, to share their struggles and stuff. And I think that's when you just really start to bring that sense of community, or even just, laugh about a frustrating validation error that, like that frustrated you. But I think ultimately when people realize that they're not alone, that's when you are a part of something bigger. It changes everything. It goes from being not just a job, but being a mission.
So, Stacy, you and I are now partnering on a plan to bring some data governance workshops using the interoperability maturity model to our state. Why do you think governance is the right next step for Indiana's data practitioners?
Well, right now, education is being driven by data, heavily being driven by data, to support the individualized, like student-centered decision making. We're moving away from that traditional one-size-fits-all model of education that's driven it for so many years, and more towards more personalized approaches, whether it's intervention, support services, or classroom instruction. But here's the thing, if we trace that back, those data driven decisions all the way back to the source of the data, we quickly run into questions about data quality. And data quality doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of good data governance. But good data governance is more than just rules and documentation. It's a framework. It's creating an understanding, consistency, accountability around how data is entered, managed, and used. And most importantly, it brings the right people to the table. That is really key. It's a people thing. It's a people issue, because improving the data it's not just a tech issue. It is absolutely a people and a policy issue at its very core to be successful. The reason that it's the natural next step for Indiana's data administrators is because we've spent years learning how to report to the state, how to wrangle EdFi, how to troubleshoot uploads. But now we're really at a kind of a crossroads of like where we need sustainable systems, right? Governance is what gets us out of that constant reactive mode and into that proactive leadership of building those sustainable models moving forward for that data quality that we're really looking for. The dashboards that everybody's seeing now, we want those data qualities for those dashboards to have actual value and meaning. And it helps districts stop that firefighting and start building. So these workshops aren't just about frameworks, they're about helping data practitioners find their voice, define their role, and start shaping those policies to affect the data that they're responsible for.
Stacy, what small but powerful mindset shifts do you think could help district leaders better support their data teams and understand the strategic value of interoperability?
That's a great question. One of the most important and honestly overdue mindset shifts is need to stop thinking about your data team as the folks you email when something breaks or the reports are due. They don't sit neatly in one department either. They're really the jack of all trades now. They're part tech, they're part admin, they're part detective, they're part firefighters, they're part guidance, they're part registrars, they're part attendance, they're part special ed, student programs, because they're always making sure that the data puzzle fits together. All because that's the way EdFi has forced the data practitioners to work now. They are and should be thought of as strategic partners. When you involve them early, they can actually help prevent fires instead of constantly being asked to put them out. I like to say if your first conversation with your data team is when the deadline is 48 hours away and the state is throwing you errors, it's too late. That's not partnership, that's panic. That's not a good strategic move. Data people need to be in the room when you're talking about scheduling, attendance policies, grading changes, staffing models, software changes, all of those things. Why? Because policy becomes data, and data becomes reporting. And I think those things have been very siloed. And when they're not involved in the why or the how, you're just hoping that it gets across the finish line. Interoperability in particular, the idea of systems talking to each other, it isn't just about tech anymore. It's about trust. You want real-time, clean data flowing between platforms. Start with real-time, clear communication between people, right? Get the curriculum team, the HR, the SIS, the lead, your data folks at the same table before the big decisions are made, before your POs and your purchases are made. Because I have personally had to deal with way too many times of the purchases are made, the contracts are signed, and then the data process person is brought into the conversation, your PD is scheduled, and teachers are being brought in on a paid day off, and the data person is expected to wave their magic data interoperability wand, and you need to make it work in about 35 minutes because my PD is scheduled. Like, if that is panic, that's not partnership, right? And so the shift is simple, really. But it's so powerful. Stop treating your data team like the help desk. Start treating them like co-pilots, like really strategic partners. They've seen the back end of your data system. They know where all of the bodies are buried back there. If you want to avoid crashing the plane, let's bring them into the fight pan. I mean, it's very simple, but very powerful.
So, Stacy, we've talked a lot about Emerging Leaders Cohort, Indiana Education Data Alliance, full-time job. You've built all of this, the community, the mentorship, the PD, while doing your full-time job. So what keeps you going and what fuels your fire?
Oh, gosh, that's an easy answer for me. I would love, love, love to be able to travel to every district and spend a few weeks and, with them and develop and implement data governance policies, but I can't be literally everywhere. I have my own family and things that I want to spend my time in. But what I can do, though, is create the avenues to teach others to build those changes in their own districts. And being able to see the change in tone of voice, the way we discuss issues and solutions, and see them getting excited, when they feel empowered, to send that email to that spark change that's and or ask that challenging question, seeing them getting excited, because they know that the importance of data governance being proactive versus reactive, and them seeing the change in their district, knowing the road was hard, but they're confident that they can walk that road. That is what fuels me very deeply. I love it.
On that note, if you could whisper one thing into the ear of every data practitioner across Indiana or across the
Mm-hmm.
country, especially those feeling burnout or undervalued, what would you want them to hear? What's your motivational pep talk?
You're not alone. That's the key right there, because one of my favorite things to do is to present at user conferences, and I love to present on workflow. We do this interactive exercise, which is fun, to tell data people, who are typically introverts, that we have to be social. Like, yes, and we're going to talk to your neighbor in our session, but we make it fun, right? And after our 5-minute social experiment, I always ask them, did you have any aha moments during your conversations? And every single time, without fail, someone always says, "I'm not alone." Like, it's this revelation to them that it never occurred to them. And so that's why I encourage every data person at the end of the session, and why I would say to them, find a fellow data person in a neighboring district or even within your own district. Go to lunch, go for coffee, or just schedule a time to just sit and talk about things, because there is so much power in just the simple act of knowing that you're not the only one feeling that way.
See, this show is called Leading Out Loud because I believe leadership isn't about a title, it's about using your voice. What does leading out loud mean to you?
First of all, I love that. I am a big proponent of leading out loud. I love that. I think that's fantastic. Leading out loud for me, it means like speaking up for work and the people that often get overlooked, especially in spaces where data work is treated like background noise, even though it's literally holding the entire operation together. That for me is kind of a hard one to swallow. So for me, that leading out loud is speaking up for those people who don't feel like they can yet, right? It also means leading by connecting. I've found that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to someone is, "Hey, I understand. Do you want to talk about it?" But it's verbally making those affirmations to people. And that's when real communities start. That's how you build trust also. And that's a true testament to leadership too. And for me personally, in my entire career path, I've also never waited for a job title to justify having a voice. And I've never seen a spreadsheet inspire change the way a shared story can. Even though I love my spreadsheets desperately, I think they can solve a lot of things. So leading out loud is about turning quiet expertise into like a collective momentum, right? To be that spark that starts that collective momentum. It's showing up, saying the thing no one else is saying, and pulling others into the conversation so they can lead too.
Stacy, what's next for the Indiana Education Data Alliance and how could people get involved?
Oh, that's great. So we have some really exciting initiatives that are coming up. We're going to start some workshops on data governance, which we're super excited about, to really bring in some training and some professional development on those so that you can start learning how to build out those data governance policies within your own district. We are also going to start a mentorship program. And so that some more details will be coming on that here shortly. And we have an email list that you can get connected to. And if you want more information on the Indiana Ed Data Alliance, we will include the email address that you can reach out to in the description of today's episode.
Hopefully we get a whole lot more folks involved in the Indiana Education Data Alliance this year. Lots of people signed up for those mentorship experiences. Hopefully more people than we have mentors for, and we can build that capacity, build some more
Yes.
mentors for next year, next time around, and
Absolutely.
continue it going. Stacy, thanks so much for spending some time chatting with me today and kind of recapping the adventures we've already had and previewing the adventures we're going to have in the not very distant future. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you for having me, Chantel, and I look forward to our many new adventures together.
Thanks for joining me on Leading Out Loud. If today's conversation sparked an idea, made you smile, or reminded you that your voice matters, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, share, or leave a quick review. And remember, your leadership deserves the mic, your story deserves the spotlight, and learning should always come with a little laughter. Catch you next time.